Good morning. Welcome to Gimpy's History Corner. This channel was named after what my grandsons Archie and Ellis call me. They call me Gimpy. Here they are sitting at the desk I'm at now. They love to come over and play on my computer. Great kids, those Ellis and Archie. All right, this is video number 32, and the topic is the Kennedy assassination. John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, happened on November 22nd, 1963. Remember, we started with the Lincoln assassination, 1865, and then the Garfield in 1881, President Garfield, and then President McKinley in 1901. And now we're at John F. Kennedy, 1963. The first three presidents assassinated were all Republican, and Kennedy was a Democrat. He took over after Dwight Eisenhower's second term. Eisenhower was a Republican. Kennedy defeated Vice President Nixon in a very, very close election in 1960, and he was one of the youngest presidents ever elected. Had a beautiful wife, two young kids. So this was 1963. He's getting ready for a re-election campaign. His vice president is Lyndon Baines Johnson from Texas. He was the head of the Congress, wanted to be president himself. Kennedy wanted someone else to be his vice president, but Johnson was good buddies with the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover was famous for collecting files on famous people and then blackmailing them. He had a huge file on John F. Kennedy because John F. Kennedy was a great womanizer, had many girlfriends. And he went to Kennedy and said, look, you can't have this guy as vice president. I want Johnson as vice president. If you don't name him vice president, I'm going to release all this evidence I have on you about your girlfriends while you're married. So Johnson became the vice president. And it was 1963. They were gearing up for the 1964 election. And Kennedy decided that he needed Texas votes to win the next term. Both Johnson and the Texas Governor John Connally advised against going, saying there's lots of crazy conservative right-wingers in Dallas. It wouldn't be a good idea. It wouldn't be safe. One of Kennedy's buddies, Adlai Stevenson, had been there in previous weeks and had been roughed up pretty badly by the conservatives, verbally and physically. But Kennedy said, no, we got to go. We need the votes. So he landed in Dallas, made a speech at a convention center, and was riding with his wife and Governor Connally and his wife down the roads with lots of cheering fans. Secret Service had been out drinking all night, so they weren't in very good shape. They were following in a car. And they made a change of plans and came down Daley Plaza next to the textbook depository building, which had a real sharp turn, and he had to slow down to make the turn. And when they went past that, gunfire broke out. Kennedy was hit multiple times in the head and the throat, and they rushed off to Parkland Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Elsewhere in Dallas, a police officer named Tippit was shot and killed, and the police thought that the shooter of both Kennedy and Officer Tippit was hiding in a movie theater in Dallas. And who they thought the assassin was a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald. So they went into the theater and captured him, took him to police headquarters. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald had a very interesting life. Single mother, moved around a lot, spent time in New York City, spent time in New Orleans, wasn't very good at school. He dropped out of high school, joined the Marines, and ended up defecting, from the Marines. He defected to Russia in the early 1960s. And Russia, of course, was a communist country. It was our enemy. But he decided, supposedly, that his life would be better in Russia. Surprisingly, they let him in, and they sent him to a town in Russia called Minsk, and he worked at a radio factory. He met a girl there named Marina. They got married, and they had children. Then he decided, I don't like Russia after all. And he hounded the State Department and the Russian government to let him go back to the United States. And surprisingly, they let him go. Very unusual situation. So he's back in the United States, and he spent time in either New Orleans or Dallas. Supposedly bought a cheap rifle on a mail order kind of thing. And that's what they say he used to shoot the president from the window of the textbook depository, the 6th floor. He had just gotten that job a few weeks before. And he was arrested. So surprisingly, they let him be interviewed by newspaper reporters. He says, I'm a patsy. They're setting me up. I didn't do this. I don't know what they're talking about. Famous black and white news video of him talking to reporters. So after a day or two, the president had been shipped back to Washington, D.C. on a plane with Johnson, Mrs. Kennedy. Johnson took the oath on the plane, so he was now the president. And Oswald was being transferred from the city police to the county jail. They had this on news camera. He was coming down an elevator into the basement to the parking area where a car was going to pick him up. And as they had him handcuffed to 2 policemen, a guy came out of the crowd with a handgun, shot him in the stomach, killed him. The guy who shot him was Jack Ruby, who owned a strip joint there in town. So obviously they wrestled Jack Ruby to the ground and took Oswald to the hospital where he died. So the accused assassin was killed by another assassin within 2 days of the president's killing. oh my gosh, what's going on in this country? This is all on TV. First time an assassination has ever been shot on TV. So President Johnson appointed a committee called the Warren Commission, made up of Chief Justice Earl Warren and a bunch of Congress people and a former CI director who Kennedy had fired. And Johnson put him on the committee. So the Warren Commission met for many months. He claimed he wanted to find out who killed the president. But the Warren Commission has a lot of critics. They did not interview everybody. They interviewed who they wanted to and only asked the questions they wanted to know. And the Warren Commission decision was that Lee Harvey Oswald, the defector to Russia, had killed Kennedy. And he had also killed Officer Tippit of the Dallas Police Department. All right, so right away, smart people look, what are you talking about? This can't just be true. One lone crazy defector shot our president from a window as a car was going by. So the theories came out, and if you watch TV, you'll see hundreds of people who have written books on this and made videos. There was a movie made, JFK, about the New Orleans connection. And there are just dozens of people that had something to do with Lee Harvey Oswald or the CIA or the Mafia or the Cubans who might have had something to do with this assassination. But the Warren report said Lee Harvey Oswald. What I've come to believe after reading so many books and watching so many movies and documentaries on this is that this was a combined effort by the CIA, the FBI, anti-Castro Cubans in Florida, and the Mafia joined forces to have multiple shooters at Daley Plaza, behind the grassy knoll, behind the fence, by the railroad overpass, or one of the other buildings alongside the Texas School Board Depository. Multiple shooters killed Kennedy, not just one. It wasn't just from the back, it was from the front and the side, because his head was pretty much blown away. Why the CIA? Well, the CIA had a plan to invade Cuba to dispose of Castro. It was created by Eisenhower. And when he left office, it came to Kennedy's desk, and Kennedy said, okay, and it failed. It's called the Bay of Pigs. And afterwards, Kennedy was upset, and he fired the longtime director of the CIA named Allen Dulles, who was a very, very, very powerful man in Washington and in the world. He had a brother named Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State with Eisenhower. And they pretty much were brutally running the world. The CIA was killing presidents of other countries and starting revolutions. It was horrible. So Kennedy fired Allen Dulles. The CIA was upset because Kennedy was trying to make peaceful moves with Russia, and they didn't trust or like Russia, so they wanted to stop him from doing that. The Cubans in Miami and in Florida were angry at Kennedy for not helping with the Bay of Pigs. They blamed him, not the CIA. And the Mafia was upset with Kennedy because his little brother Bobby, who was Attorney General, was putting their leaders in jail, harassing them. And Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, had gone to the mafia to get help with the election in Chicago. And Kennedy may not have won the president without the mob's help in Chicago voting. So they were angry too. So it was a combination of CIA, Cubans, and the mafia who had done the shooting and planning. But the Warren report said no, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. Later, several congressional committees said no, there was a conspiracy, but we don't know who it was. I think Johnson, the vice president, knew about the plan. He was in huge criminal problems. If this had not happened, he probably would have been arrested and arraigned and maybe put in prison, obviously not be vice president anymore. Kennedys were going to dump him from the ticket anyway for 64. He was a corrupt guy, and they had the evidence of that. He had people who were killing his enemies for him, and he took lots of money and bribes. So I think he knew about the plan, and then he did the Warren Commission to cover it up, along with J. Edgar Hoover and Allen Dulles, who was on that committee. Horrible thing. So that's the fourth president to be assassinated, John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. I was like second grade. I remember them coming over the loudspeaker announcing the president has been shot. I didn't understand it at the time, of course, and went home and watched television of all of this happening. Shooting of Oswald, interviewing Oswald, the funeral with Jackie and Bobby and Jackie's kids. It was so sad. Okay, that's my analysis of the Kennedy assassination. It wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. He was the patsy, as he said he was. I think that's true. It was a government of his own government. It wasn't Russia. It wasn't China. It was our own government that killed Kennedy. Okay, well, the Reds lost again last night. That's 2 in a row to the Pirates, the last place team in the division. But they're still only a game out, so they can still come back. Come on, Reds. Thank you.